Welcome to One Good Scare, the show where I take a deep dive into everything horror has to offer. My name is Jimmy Champane, and today we're going to be talking about Halloween 2. No, not that Halloween 2, the other Halloween 2. The original Halloween 2. After the monumental success of the original Halloween, the producers were chomping at the bit to go back and cash in on a sequel. The problem was John Carpenter and Debra Hill weren't too keen on the idea of going back to that universe. Carpenter didn't really feel like he had anything else to add to the story, which resulted in him sitting in front of a typewriter drunk trying to hammer out this movie. So by the time he was done with that script, he obviously didn't want to direct it, so he went to the art director on the original Halloween, Tommy Lee Wallace, and asked him to do it. Wallace said no, so then John Carpenter went with his second choice, which turned out to be Rick Rosenthal. Even though everyone creatively involved with this movie seemed to be doing it pretty much out of obligation and to, make some money, Irwin Yablans and Mustafa Akkad were really excited about it, so they increased the budget from a meager $320,000 to a pretty massive at the time $2.5 million. Because Halloween 2 picks up during the ending of Halloween, I feel like the producers kind of got gypped on this one. They could have just gone with a very slightly increased budget, considering the fact that Rosenthal basically set out to mimic as much as he could from the original Halloween. It makes sense for continuity, and this movie came out 3 years almost to the day after that original film on October 30th, 1981. It's another weird choice considering the beginning of this movie's first week is on Halloween, so you feel like it's gonna make the most money it's gonna make on that first night. At least in part because of that, Halloween 2 didn't light the world on fire when it came out either. On its $2.5 million budget, it managed to pull in $25 million, which is pretty good, but when you compare that to the $60 to $70 million that Halloween pulled in, that's a pretty big difference. It also didn't manage to impress critics that much either, and it's currently sitting at a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. It makes sense that most critics didn't love it because they were vehemently against slashers at that point in time, and this one was a lot bloodier and gorier than the original movie, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now that we have the background out of the way, let's get into the movie. Halloween 2 again makes the bold choice of picking up during the ending of Halloween. Not immediately after, during. Can you even imagine the pressure of turning John Carpenter's masterpiece into one 4-hour-ish movie? The new shots mix in well, but I never understood the reasoning for switching to a wide of the house's exterior. Was the other one not good enough? It's extra work for no reason. I do like that this movie continues the technique of having an intro scene followed by a title sequence. The first time I saw Halloween 2, I was pretty mad that the pumpkin was slightly different from the one in the original, but it breaks open to reveal a skull, and to this day I think that's one of the most metal effects of all time. Following up the intro sequence with a POV of Michael is another great idea on Rosenthal's part. It's also a great way to win over fans who weren't so keen on John Carpenter not coming back. Getting to see Loomis say he shot Michael 6 times from a different perspective really drives home the idea that this is the same night. A lot of people theorize that Michael likes going after teenage girls who look like his sister, and after revisiting this intro scene, I see where this idea comes from since he leaves the Elrods alone only to head next door and murder this girl. That first kill is underwhelming to say the least. There's not a lot of thought put into the shot work, and jumping out from behind a wall isn't the Michael Myers way. Where's the slow methodical stalking? I gotta be honest with you guys here, I've always attributed the shift in tone and direction to the fact that Rosenthal just isn't as good of a director as John Carpenter, but truth be told, John Carpenter is to blame for the increased gore and violence. Once the movie was finished, he came back to reshoot some scenes, and during those reshoots, he added a ton of gore and blood. That was because in the 3 years between Halloween and Halloween 2, a bunch of movies copied Halloween and increased the gore factor a lot, so he didn't want Halloween 2 to seem tame compared to its contemporaries. The way the doctors treat Laurie in the hospital really shows off the small town sensibility on display here. There's like 7 people working in this place, and from the get-go it seems like they're in over their head. Ben Tramer's death bugs me more and more every time I see it. I made a video all about this back in July, but I don't understand how this even happens. Loomis points his gun at him and the guy just walks into the street before getting hit by this dumbass cop. My first thought is maybe he thinks it's Michael, but then he gets out of the car and says he didn't even see him.
He came out of nowhere.
What a dumbass. The only course of action here is to take this guy's badge, take this guy's gun, and just send him off into the night. He is done as a police officer. damn, that Jimmy character is really cool. It's nice after watching Rob Zombie's movies to have some kindness from these side characters, and now I really want that jacket. Showing the audience what happens after a slasher movie like Halloween has become a staple of the franchise over the past 4 decades. It's a plotline that's explored in H2O, Rob Zombie's sequel, and now the new Halloween, but the trope was solidified in Halloween 2. I just watched that scene where Brackett finds Annie in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, and I didn't even remember that it was a reference from this movie, and now I'm just sad. And once again, I get why he's blaming Loomis. Even though Michael's escape isn't his fault, I think it's cool that Carpenter wrote Loomis in a way that makes him feel personally responsible for the aftermath of it. Since we've seen it a few times now, I guess it's time to talk about the mask. It looks a lot different from that original mask, but you might be surprised to find out that by all accounts, it is the original, and there's a few contributing factors to why it looks so different. First, between Halloween and Halloween 2, the mask sat under Debra Hill's bed, and due to her heavy smoking, it yellowed and the rubber rotted. Second, Dick Warlock played the Shape in this movie, and his head is wider than Nick Castle's, so the mask got stretched horizontally. And finally, the way he pulled it off caused the hair and neckline to look different. In any other case, I would praise the use of the original prop in a sequel, but this is a time where remolding the mask to fit Warlock's head would have resulted in a much better look, again considering this movie takes place on the same night as the original.
Don't make me cry, I need your pie.
That bud is such a rascal, but I gotta give him credit, they did pick some pretty actresses to play nurses in this movie. I never realized until this movie that Laurie never actually knew who was coming after her, and the randomness of it makes the Shape so much scarier. The years of wondering why he chose her would really do a number on anyone, and I wish so hard Carpenter left it at that. A lot of people think that because John Carpenter and Debra Hill wrote this movie that they were the ones who came up with the sibling plotline, but that's not the case. I already mentioned that neither of them were too stoked to come back to this movie, and they basically turned in the script as soon as they were done with it. The producers found it a little boring and a lot too simple, so they decided to spruce it up a bit, and that's where the sibling plotline came from. The reason I hate it so much is because it gives a character, the Shape, motivation, which he shouldn't have other than to kill. Making Laurie his sister and making it so he goes after her seems like an inconsequential change, but it influenced the series in every single movie following Halloween 2, and that's a huge problem. I've always liked this scene where the inept security guard realizes something isn't right, but it goes on just a little too long. It's almost been 30 minutes since we've seen Michael kill anyone, and there's a real lack of tension. If Rosenthal cut in a POV shot of Michael at any point during the scene, I think it would have worked a lot better. That being said, Ben Tramer's burned corpse is a visual treat. This movie came out right at the beginning of the gloriously gory 80s, but I can't think of a better sign of what was to come. I'm sure this really freaked people out when they saw the camera linger on it back then. So I guess Laurie knew this whole time that she was adopted and that Michael is her brother. I just find it hard to believe that she wouldn't have any idea it was him coming after her in the first movie with a backstory like his. Getting rid of this thread seemed to really rub people the wrong way, but revisiting it in this movie, I'm all for it. I love the idea of Michael tricking his victims into thinking nothing's wrong. I also really like the makeup effect on this kill. It's obviously more brutal than the 1978 Michael was, but it's not really that over the top or gory. The skin peeling back is just enough to stick in my brain when I leave the theater. The scene in the elementary school is a much better example of building out Michael's backstory. The movie is called Halloween after all, so tying the Shape into the holiday is a lot cooler to me than the sibling idea. It would have been nice if Loomis said Samhain right though. Now this is a terrifying sequence, and it's absolutely my favorite in the movie. The prosthetics on Dr. Mixer's eyes are top notch for both the 80s and today, and I love that instead of having her run out screaming, she slowly backs into Michael. Rosenthal could have gone the cliche route and had him slit her throat, but the idea of plunging an air-filled syringe into her brain is a special kind of terrifying. I still get scared when I think about it to this day, and even more terrified when I see it. The mask actually does look pretty great here too. Oh, thanks for joining us, Laurie. I almost forgot you were here. The sequence of Michael stalking Laurie through the hospital is pretty great, but it gets a little bogged down thanks to some crappy editing. The reverse shots of her crawling through the window are the worst offenders of that point. When it cuts to her on the other side of the window, she's easily making her way through, but when it cuts back to her legs, it seems like she's just sitting there. And we know he's not going to catch her too. This movie is at its best in my opinion when Loomis, Laurie, and Michael are finally at the hospital. I love when Michael busts through the glass and gets even more solidification on the fact that he's immortal once Loomis pumps him full of lead. Can you believe Smith's Grove tried to take him out of Haddonfield? What a bunch of idiots. I enjoyed watching Michael slowly make his way through the hospital, but I'm glad that during this last sequence he's in full-on pure evil mode. He wants to kill Laurie and he's done fucking around, which is great. I will say though that once Laurie shoots his eyes out, things get a little hammy with Michael swinging that scalpel around. I like the effect of the blood streaming down his mask, but things go on just a little bit too long in my opinion. On the other hand, the choice to kill Loomis with Michael was a really smart move. It's a great callback to the whole Van Helsing versus Dracula equation where you can't have one without the other, but watching this now after going through Halloween 4, 5, and 6, it's just so hilarious to me that they even bothered acknowledging the explosion in 4. They should have just pretended it never happened instead of applying that dumb burn prosthetic. The shot of Michael walking out of the explosion burning is absolutely iconic. It's one of the coolest horror movie shots ever, and it's a great callback to the original thing. The idea, of course, was to let him stay dead and continue the franchise as a yearly anthology series, but we all know that's not how it turned out. The best analogy I have for Halloween 2 is that it's your favorite pillowcase full of candy after a successful night of trick-or-treating. First, you gotta pull out the good candy like the Reese's and the Nerds rope. In Halloween 2, that's the mimic John Carpenter art style, the incredible POV intro, the hospital setting, and that hot tub kill. Then you've got the candy that you don't really like but you will eat, like Milk Duds or Werther's Originals. That's Laurie being underutilized, the poor direction, and the frankly kinda boring story. Then you've got the worst of the worst, the shit that makes you want to egg your neighbor's house, the Necca wafers, the popcorn balls, the weird apple from your local dentist, the stuff you just don't want. That's Laurie being Michael's sister, that's Ben Tramer's weird untimely death, and the mask that doesn't fit right, is kinda yellow, and just looks bad. And of course, using your favorite pillowcase is the Halloween wrapper around this. You might get some bad candy or a popcorn ball one year, but you're not gonna skip trick-or-treating the next year. That's why even though I absolutely hate some parts of Halloween 2, as soon as Halloween's credits roll, I just pop it in and start it up. It's good, it's not great, but it's not bad, and that's why I genuinely love Halloween 2, despite its flaws. But yeah guys, that's what I think of Halloween 2. I'd love to hear what you think of it down in the comments below, and remember to check back early in the morning on Halloween to watch my one good scare on Halloween. Also, I set up a Discord server. If you want the link to that, it's in the description. It's actually filling up pretty quick, so if you want to come talk about horror movies or video games or whatever, that's the place to do it. Anyways guys, my name is Jimmy Champane, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.